Hello and welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Business. Today I am joined by the fabulous Joe Gregory, marketer, publisher, and co-founder of Rethink Press. Joe, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Nice to see you, Stokely. Good to be on.
Thank you. And of course, as always, I can't forget the wonderful co-host, Nathan Lomax.
Hello,
Hey,
mate. How
mate.
you doing?
I'm all good. Good to see you again.
Joe, nice to have you in the house. How's things?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Busy as ever. Getting loads done and too much to do still. Always too much to do.
That's good, Joe. So yeah, thanks for having you on, Joe. First, let's start right from the top. So tell us a little bit more about Rethink Press and the work that you do with authors to help them publish their material.
Okay, so Rethink Press began in 2009.
Okay.
I had a publishing business before that, and it was a traditional publishing model. So a traditional model for publishing is where the author comes to a publisher with a book and an idea and pitches it to them. The publisher wants to see they've got a platform because they want to sell books. And then you take on the book. The publisher invests quite a bit of money and resource into making that thing good. And then their plan is to exploit that book and make as much money as they can from selling it and selling rights to it. So that was a traditional model. In 2009, my co-director Lucy joined the business, which then was called Bookshaker.
Okay.
But I was ultimately, because I was kind of putting the money down, I was ultimately making the decision. So Lucy would be the commissioning editor. So we'd see books come to us. She'd make the first decision, like, yeah, this looks like it's got legs. But I'd ultimately have to make the decision because it was my money on the line, whether we
Right.
were going to publish or not, and we were going to make the money back from selling books and all the things we could do. Um, the challenge with that is some books you just can't tell if they're going to be brilliant sellers or not. Like the books that did really well for that business weren't the books I expected would do really well, and the books that I thought were going to do really well didn't do so well. So what I realized is publishers play a numbers game, and so they're constantly having to have new books, and some of the books will support the books that aren't selling well. But that's on the model of having to sell books to make money back. And
Mhm.
Lucy spotted something really crucial, which is I was saying no to books that had a perfectly good business case to exist. So they're quite niche books, possibly wouldn't sell very well, but you could see why the author would value that book and benefit from that book. And
Mm.
that's where I started was, I'm a marketer by training and background. Is I was using books to help authors raise their authority, but I was still operating from this position of traditional publishing, which is let's make the money back from selling books. But
Mm.
as you all know, entrepreneurs make money back from selling their higher value goods and services.
Mm.
When that switch happened, Lucy said, like, let's just start charging them. We could charge the authors, like for the books that we think we're not going to make the money back on with a traditional model, we could charge them. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like that idea. It sounds a bit vanity publishing to me. I don't like the idea of taking money off people to do something that has traditionally been the agreement is it's kind of free. The publisher takes up that part of the slack. But I said, let's try it out. I'll do all the publishing stuff. You confront it, so you be the face of it. And if so, secretly I was thinking if it goes really badly, then it's like I didn't. It wasn't me that said let's take money off the authors.
I like that
Um,
strategy.
so we did that, and really, really quickly, within like a few books, we started to realize actually by charging, we could do a better job. Like the books were good before. I'm not going to knock the books I did,
Mm.
from 2003 to 2009. They were good books. Um, but the quality got better because we had more resource and more money to put into making those books brilliant.
Yeah.
The authors were getting better results because the reframe for me was if we charge them, they've got to get return on investment, and we're not cheap. We're not at the low end of the market in terms of getting books done. We do a professional penguin level job of the books we do. So it's a significant investment, and I'm like, they've got to get the investment back quickly because I won't sleep at night if they don't. So focus them on how can you position the book to grow your business and sell you and to build your business was the real key.
Yeah.
And when they knew they could do that, they were giving books away. So that's something that a traditional publisher doesn't like, because if the author's giving copies of books away or giving their PDF away, that eats into their ability to sell. It's diluting their way of getting the money back.
Mm.
But with our model, it's like, you've already paid us really well for what we do. We want your business to be successful now. So it's, yeah, of course, give away the PDF. Of course, get books as cheap as we can possibly get them to you so you can give them away as a deliberate lead generator. So we get great results, and authors, we often hear stories of authors like, I gave a copy of a book to an ex-colleague, they gave it to their boss, and within a few weeks I got a 30 grand contract out of it. And that's far beyond what most authors will make from a non-fiction book just selling books. So our focus is really for entrepreneurs and business owners to elevate them, to elevate their status, and to make sure the book is growing their business. And so what we say, this is our kind of reason being, is nothing sells you like a book in the expert space. And Rethink Press's goal is to make sure we're the best in the business at building those books. And that's what
Love
we've been
it.
doing since 2009.
Yeah, I love that. I think interesting for me, there's no doubt now that books build authority. Okay, we all get that. But the biggest obstacle entrepreneurs, I guess, will throw back at you all the time is around time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know Stokely and I are always having this debate around, look, we're so strapped for time. Whenever, I'd love to write a book, but when will we find the time? How do you deal with that with the kind of entrepreneurs that come to you?
Well, I'm really straightforward about when their business is in the right place. So often, if an entrepreneur comes to us too early on their back end, their product ecosystem isn't fully kind of formed, then they probably haven't got the time, because they should be focusing on doing that. And I'll often say, look, you should probably be doing a book in about a year's time, when you've got that really nailed, when you've got that track record, and you've got clients, and you've got resource to be able to do that. Because I'll get onto that. It sounds like a plug. We can write books for our authors, and we do that.
Yeah.
But if they want to write it themselves, and I think that's a very important thing to do, because it gives you clarity on your business and your proposition. It's finding the time can be difficult if you've got other things to juggle. So I'd always put it back to, entrepreneurs are really good at working out upside, downside, where is the most effort going to get the biggest reward. So you've got to make sure the numbers work for them. So if I can make a compelling case, like this book is going to do a lot of good for your whole business, from whether the book is going to help you attract and inspire partners that can work with you, attract and inform employees and people that work directly within your business, if it's going to attract new business opportunities and customers. And then we can put some numbers on that and work out, what is it that you've got as a core thing to sell? How many of those would the power of this book, how many extra things that you wouldn't have got before would the book need to do for you to say this was a no-brainer investment of time and money?
You're making it work for the entrepreneur, aren't you?
You've got to. So I always start right from the end point, is what's in it for the business and what's in it for you. And if you can get some proper numbers on that, then, because a lot of people say it's time, actually it's guilt. It feels such a very personal thing to do. Authors, entrepreneurs, you run a business, you're trying to employ people, you're trying to drive the business forwards. And you're like, I'm going to do this little project. It's all about me. And it feels very personal to write a book. It's a very personal sharing. And so sometimes it's not actually time, it's guilt. And it's like, I can't justify putting those couple of hours towards that. Where if you said to an entrepreneur, well, you need to hit the phones 2 hours a day, this is how you grow your business, they wouldn't doubt that was an important thing. So when it's the right time to do a book, it's actually understanding what the value of it is for the business. That helps with the time thing. And then the other thing is knowing it is valuable for the business. It's not just a selfish kind of vanity project. It's a vital tool. If you're driving the business successful and you're the face of the business, to get the book done. And so that's a kind of big picture. Actually, specifically doing it, there are two kind of camps on this. So my approach to getting the book done is to do massive sprints. So I'll say, right, I've got 2 days. I'm just going to do all the work in 2 days, and I'll blast through it. It may have taken me a few weeks before to get the plan right and to make sure I know what I'm going to write, and to sort of think it through, and kind of, when you're in the shower or riding a bike or walking the dog, kind of thinking, how am I going to express that? But then I'll block out a week. So I wrote 28,000 words of my upcoming book in a week. And I just said, right, no distractions, just this week I'm writing a book. It's not finished. It's not finished yet. There's stuff that needs to be done to it. So that's one way of doing it. The way Lucy does it, and she nails it this way. She'll set an hour aside a day, every day. So just like you might say, right, in the morning between 6 and 7, I usually just mess around on Twitter. She'll be like, that's book time. She'll tell everybody in her immediate family, anybody that's working with her, look, that's like sacred time now. I'm writing a book.
Don't move it.
And she's able to just, and I think the switching gears thing is where you've got to work out whether you're a kind of a sprinter or a kind of a marathon runner, in terms of the approach. Lucy's able to very quickly switch back into, I'm writing the book now. It takes me about half an hour to warm up. And, sometimes maybe a few hours to warm up or to sort of switch gears. So that's why I need to do it as one big batch. I've got to just, like, I'm in it. That's what I'm doing. Whereas Lucy can, like, an hour there, stop, hour there, stop. So she'll schedule through the day. A typical book that we recommend our authors write is about 40,000 words. You can do that in about 30 hours of writing.
Why is there 40,000 words? What's the magic number?
The magic number. So most traditional publishers aim for 60 to 80,000 words. And that produces really intimidating books that people don't read. And you've probably heard the acronym TLDR, too long did not read. Yeah. That happens all the time with books. So it becomes shelf help. It sits there on the shelf looking pretty light. I love Robert Cialdini, and you can see behind me, I've got Persuasion there. I haven't read that one. Like I like his other book. I like Influence because it's like that big rather than that big.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time those books don't get read. And my view is if they don't get read, they don't get the opportunity to transform. They don't get the opportunity to pitch the value that the entrepreneur has put into that book. So we're like 40,000 words takes about 5 hours to read. And it produces about a 4.5 hour, 5 hour audio book, which is nice, kind of like, a couple of, commutes through a week, and you've kind of managed to get through a book, or a longish plane flight, or a train journey somewhere across the country and back. It gives you the chance to actually inhale the whole book, and then you've been transformed. Whereas if it's too long, it's like, this is going to take me a month, and often it doesn't get read. So 40,000 words seems to be the sweet spot in terms of substance and people's ability to kind of say, that looks easy, like I'll read all that, and they can see progress like halfway through, like I'm nearly there, like I'll keep going. Whereas if it's a massive tome, people tend not to. So we're really all about this. Is if you see the book as really an extended sales pitch and a demonstration of value, we want people to see the whole pitch. So we wouldn't advise making massive books. Some authors do massive books, and some do shorter. But 40,000 words is our sweet spot. It takes about, so in hours terms, writing that first draft takes about 30 hours to do a book of that size.
Okay.
So Lucy would set an hour a day
for a month
aside for a month. That's how Lucy would do it. I'd work on it for a week and kind of try and get the same number of hours of content. And either approach is valid. It depends on your personal style. All I would say is my personal style when it comes to being productive is dysfunctional compared to Lucy's. So if you think I don't know which one to follow, I'd probably follow Lucy's and see how it goes, which is like 1 hour a day. And set that aside. Like, this is what people forget to do. They put it on there kind of tentatively, like it's penciled in, and then they bail on themselves. And you wouldn't do that on, a potential new client. You wouldn't do that on a meeting that you'd agreed with somebody else. That would be seen as bad. So those are kind of sacred meetings with yourself to get the job done. And that helps a lot to like really think, actually, you are creating meetings with potential clients in the future. You are by not getting the book written and scheduling that time, you are not given the opportunity to hear and see what you've got to say.
Yeah, I guess it's about like not being so harsh on yourself as well with it, at the same time being really structured. But
yeah,
for me, I would beat myself up if I set myself 30 hours and then didn't complete it.
Yeah. I mean, be easy on yourself. Absolutely. I think that's a really good point, Stokely. So the first draft is going to be shit as well. Like a lot of people.
I think your first book's going to be crap.
Sorry if you need to edit that out. I'm sorry. Like
no, we don't.
Do a shitty first draft, and they're like, this isn't good enough. Well, like every professionally published book has probably gone through about 4 or 5 edit stages. All that thing is done, and proofread. So it's supposed to be shit, and a lot of people don't know that because they've read something by an author they love. Like they've how did Gary Vaynerchuk write this? He's like a genius, and then like I've got to be that good. And I'm sure his first draft was kind of a shitty first draft as well. So we've got a process. It's an acronym called WRITER.
Yeah.
And here's an exercise for people watching this or listening. Try and breathe in and out exactly at the same time. Oh, that sounds rude. You might need to cut that. You can't actually do it. It's one or the other.
Joe's leg.
So you can't actually do it. And this is what writing. This is the thing that people often get themselves stuck on. You just got to write. You got to like literally breathe it all out. Breathe it all out onto the page. Then once you've done that, so the WRITER model, the first letter in WRITER, it's an acronym, is right, and it means just right. So you don't get hung up on research. If there's a stat you need, you just put stat needed. Just keep writing and get that flow out. Just start. And what you'll often find, like the first kind of 1,000, 2,000 words are awful because you're warming up. It's like warming up for exercise, and then you find your flow, and then as you get better and kind of get more into a routine, just getting it out there, not being too critical. Like you were saying, Stokely, we're often critical of ourselves. Just let it come out. Like your stuff. If you've got a clear plan, it's just like let that out. Don't edit, don't review, don't try and improve it at that point. So you do the writing stage and get the whole book done. Then the R in the writer model is to review it. So we recommend you print it out, so you can't, you can avoid the kind of tendency, or the kind of, I'm going to start typing and changing stuff, which will cause extra problems. You print the thing out, and then you get yourself into a reader's mindset, and then you do the review stage. So the R for review, print it all out, go through as though you're a reader, and just put post-its or comments in the margins where things don't work, or where you need a bit extra, or something's not clear. And we do that whole stage. Then we do I in the writer process is improve. So with that printed manuscript to your side with all your notes on, then you go back to the keyboard. Then you make the adjustments based on your notes that make sense. And you don't do any more than that. You're not proofreading. You're not worrying about spelling at this stage. You're just improving the structure and making sure everything flows and that you're happy with it. So that WRI part of the writer process is the kind of getting it out there thing. Then we've got the T, which is for test. So we recommend having test readers. And here's a way, like if you need accountability, is to tell them when you're going to deliver it. Right? But you need a test reader. You need really 3 good test readers. Is one of the readers will be good at words. They'll be a professional writer in some way, so they can be looking, and you'll be asking them specifically, look how I'm expressing this, like spot for any kind of stylistic things I could tweak and tune up, or, you know, consistent grammar mistakes that it would be nice to kind of polish out at this point. Then you'd want a peer, somebody that's a subject expert, so they can check that you haven't said something stupid. And we all do it. Like in the heat of the moment, you just write something, and I don't know, you might misplace a kind of a call to action with a funnel or something. You'll do something weird that doesn't make any sense. So you want somebody that's a kind of a peer and a fellow professional in your subject area to check, and you ask them, check it for me saying stupid shit. And where I have, just like help me to correct it. And then ideally you want somebody that represents as another test reader. So 3 readers are ideal for the test stage. A beta reader that represents your ideal reader. And the question to them is, have I made anything unclear? Is there anything you just got questions about? You want to get past that. It's like the novice mind thing. As an expert on your stuff, you forget what people don't know about what you know. Yeah. And so having your ideal target reader to read it, and with a specific brief, which is, if I say something that you don't understand, tell me. And if it's a stupid question, I want to hear it, because that means I've missed something. You get that feedback, and then you go back through. So that's the test stage. What I'd say, most people, when they do the test, they send it out to 10 people that they like. And they all say, yeah, it's really nice, because they haven't been specific in asking for what feedback they want. So you want to tell them, like, I want critical feedback, and I want critical feedback specifically on these things. You don't really want an editor's feedback at that point. You don't want somebody that's too much of an editor and a proofreader, because they'll make you feel shit, because they'll go through and point out all your grammar mistakes, and that can kind of knock you off your flow. So you don't want to brief them to do that. And if you get too much red pen, you want to say, like, thanks for that. That wasn't the point. Like, but you know, take it internally, but that wasn't the point of that, so ignore it. So that's the test stage. Then with that feedback, you go to the edit stage. So you bring in all of the feedback you got from the beta readers, and you rework your manuscript to make it even better and tighter. And then at that final stage, the edit stage, then the final R is repeat anything that needs to be done. So getting that first thing done, when I've kind of talked you through the writer process, that write stage, that very first bit, that's going to take about 30 hours. By the time you've gone through it again, it's probably another 30 hours. So you're talking 60 hours of time to create a decent first draft. And it's still going to be grammatically inconsistent and incorrect. It's still going to have spelling mistakes, but it's going to be structurally and content-wise much, much closer to a finished thing. So that's the writer's job. That's about the time where it's ready to be submitted to a publisher for publishing.
I always, when we have a piece of work that's finished, we always, if I think it's like perfect, I'll send it to someone and I'll say, what do you think's wrong with this? And it's a great way of like asking someone, like they'll pick out the bits that they think's wrong with it, rather than like you saying, okay, there's something wrong with this, find it out. And even if there's nothing wrong with it at all, like it's absolutely perfect, if they find something, then I know there's something wrong with it. Yeah. I love doing that with people.
That's a really good frame as well, because you've given them permission to tell you. Because some people they want to just, you know, I'm generally enthusiastic and want to make people feel good about their stuff. So, you know, if somebody says, what do you think? My default is, yeah, it's effing brilliant. And I won't necessarily, unless they say, like, tell me specifically what you'd change, I'm not going to give them that. You know, I like to give advice and feedback when I've been asked for it.
Yeah.
And so the way you frame that is brilliant, Stokely. Yeah, because like, tell me what's wrong with this. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, they
even
want me
if
to. So you know, you're setting them up to search for that thing. It's good.
yeah, even
I
if
really like that.
there's nothing
I'm
wrong
going
with
to
it,
borrow that. I think that's great.
even,
Um,
even if you think it's perfect, that someone will always say something, and it just gives you a very honest response.
you just reminded me of something. So the first book I self-published, 2003, I co-wrote a book on marketing when I was still running a marketing business,
Okay.
and we printed 12,000 of them. And I didn't know anything about publishing that I was a marketer. I didn't know how big 12,000 books was, like in terms of physical volume. So a lorry pulled up with our books, and then a forklift came off the back and it pulled off a pallet full of boxes. I'm like, oh my God, are all those for us? He's like, no, there's another 3 pallets on the truck. And at the time, we had offices in the centre of Birmingham, and the lift was out of order. It was a hot day, and we had offices on the 3rd floor. And so I remember painfully carrying all those boxes of books up to the 3rd floor, and we filled one of our offices floor to ceiling with boxes of books. And I'm like, shit, we've got to sell these now. But we were so excited. So like the selling them, we managed, but that's a different story for another time. We got the boxes open. We're like, we'd proof the hell out of this. We were in advertising and marketing. We're good at proofing. Like, we proofed it. There were no errors in our book. And I opened the book. I'm like, oh, it looks brilliant. I smelt the book. I'm like, oh, we finally got our book. It's the first book we did. And then I kind of flicked through, and it just leapt out at me. Page 7, there was a massive typo. Like, it was just wrong. Like, and it was like an idiotic typo. It was a misspelling. And I'm like, we've got 12,000 of these now, and they've all got this horrible typo in them. So
What happened to
going back to
everyone?
what you say, yeah, if you think it's perfect, it's worth another check. Um, and it was kind of painful, but nobody noticed.
Joe,
Good.
one of the things this show's becoming well known for is us offering practical insight to our listeners.
Yeah.
I'm keen. We talked a little bit there about getting started, but if you could say 3 top tips for someone just kind of, getting it done and getting started and pulling the trigger, what would you say is the 3 top things to do?
First of all, know the purpose for your business. So know where your business is at. Know what you want the book to do as a strategic tool. Because there are loads of tools. You could use video to position yourself as an authority. You could use blogs. You could use podcasting. You can use so many tools to position yourself as an authority. So you want to know where the book's going to fit. And it's not for everybody. Like, as I've already said, 60 hours of writing time just to get the thing ready to publish is quite a considerable investment of time. And if you compare that, like, how many videos could I do in 60 hours? Or social posts, you could probably do a hell of a lot more. So you want to know what the purpose is. And so, number one, work out the purpose for your business. Why are you doing this? Is it to raise profile? Is it because, and this is one of the things why I love books and why I think they're magic and they work perfectly with the mix with all the other channels, is it's a tangible physical asset that you can pop on somebody's desk that can be shared without plugging anything in. So, you've got a book, they can be passed on to somebody else. And it's the most viral thing in the world. And also, we're culturally conditioned not to throw it in the bin. Like, you can make beautiful brochures. You can spend a fortune on beautiful brochures. If somebody says, oh, it's still sales material, they'll throw it in the bin because we've not been conditioned not to. Everybody's been conditioned. Like, books are valuable. The last thing, even if you hate the book, and I've had some like real stinker books in my time, I still would give it to somebody else or pop it in a charity shop. I wouldn't.
Just hospital pass it. Just be like, nah.
Yeah, you don't throw them away. So these things, like, once they're out in the world, they're like your little army of sales people that will get you pitch perfect every time. It's not going to be, they don't have to be plugged into any extra software. Everybody knows how they work. You just open the pages and they're there for you. They're physical. People can see visibly other people with them, and people want to buy what other people are holding and have got. So it's a really useful tool to position everything else and to be able to cut through where digital may be a bit crowded. So I do that. It's also a no-brainer. So if you put a kind of a lead gen offer together, and I'll give an example. So one of our authors, Daniel Priestley, who wrote Key Personal Influence, he gives away 1,000 books a month as a lead gen. And I'm like, wow, like that's a lot of books. And this was the stat he gave me. I interviewed him just recently for our audience, and he said for every 1,000 books he gives away, it generates 75 to 100,000 pounds of revenue, and he tracks everything, so he knows directly where it came from. He also says, even if somebody's found us through some of our video stuff or from our scorecard, if I think they haven't read the book yet, we send them a book, because he wants to, and he didn't use this word, but he wants to indoctrinate them. He wants to demonstrate value. He wants them to understand what he's all about before they buy into the next stage. So you asked for 3 tips. So the first tip is purpose. And there are loads of reasons why a book is powerful, but I'd get some of the other stuff going first. I'd definitely have a lead generation strategy in place first and a core product before writing a book. Then it's the person. Who are you writing it for? A lot of the time I see where the lack of clarity comes for a new author is they're trying, like, they might be working in corporate, but they help salespeople. And so they're like, should I write for the salesperson, or am I writing, because they're seen it as a business tool, should I be writing it for the business? And I'm like, really, it's always people. Whoever's going to read it, there's never, a business doesn't read a book. It's a person within a business. So get really clear on the person. If it is for the manager, if it is for a C-level person in the business around sales, that will drastically change the messaging in the book than a practical hands-on guide for salespeople. And then it comes back to the purpose again. What's the strategy? Do you want every salesperson in that business to buy into and understand this sales mechanism, this process? Or do you just want to use this as a lead generator to get the people that are managing them? And is it more of a managing salespeople kind of book? And knowing that difference will change everything. What can often go wrong is when you try and write to both audiences in one book. And you don't really hit either, you miss them both. So I'd always go back to who's the end user. And often in the corporate point, it's usually somebody that isn't the decision maker, because the decision maker will just go, this is going to help all those people I have to make decisions for. So that's the purpose. And then it's another P. So if you notice there's a purpose, a person, then you've got the premise or promise. And depends what you're doing. Like, it starts with a problem. What problem is the book going to solve?
Yeah.
And what are you promising? What's a big promise? So if you look at some of the books behind me, which they're always like placed like that. It's not just because we're on this. It's not product placement or anything. Like, how to be fucking awesome. That promise is absolutely clear. And if you know Dan Meredith, if you're in his world, his audience really like to be more like him. He's a social influencer. He's got an amazing Facebook group. He's online all the time, sharing all the time. And they just want to be more awesome. They want to be more like him. So the promise is clear there. Look at the other book, How to Write Your Book Without the Fuss. The problem is they don't know how to write the book, or they think it's going to be challenging. Yeah. And so the promise there is we can do it and it's not going to be so hard. So getting that promise right is really, really important as well. But you can't do that unless you know the person. Because as I go back to the previous example, like a manager of salespeople might be something like, inspire your team to get better results or to close more business. If you actually aim it at the salespeople, it would be like how to drum up more business, be the top earner in your company. Rah. It's a different proposition. So getting the big idea for the book and what's in it for the reader is the other thing before you start. So that's kind of the P. That's the 3 things. I would also say before you write a word, you've got to plan it properly, like fully planned out, and we've got a process for doing that.
So you guys do planning days, don't you, as well as?
Yeah, so we do a thing called a book plan intensive, and that goes through another acronym model. I don't want to overload your audience with like more acronyms.
Loves an acronym.
Yeah, I love an acronym. That process sets out, and we've got a canvas for doing this. We've got a team of booksmiths that go out. They spend a day in a room with the authors, and it's a process I developed. I spent a year working one-to-one as a book plan intensive, helping authors to plan their content out. And we use cards and this methodology to get the structure of all the pieces that need to be in a book mapped out. And we use a big table, and I've always got cards with me. So I use these colored cards, and there's a great thing, like when they're on the ring at the moment, so they're bound at the moment, when they're all out there, you spread it out and you're like, well, we need stories and we need statistics. And you can see from a kind of 30,000 foot point of view, what's missing, what content do we need. And we start with that. So you plan the whole thing out. So you make sure you've covered every base. What often people think they've got writer's block when they're writing is they're still being creative. They're still being generative with the ideas. So they start talking about one thing and they're like, oh, I must tell them about that, but it was never in the plan. So by planning it in advance, getting them all spread out, making sure there are no gaps, making sure there's a consistent rhythm and flow to all of the chapters, that the start matches the end, that the promise that you made at the beginning is being fulfilled throughout the book. So all of those things are handled. Then you can create a prototype book. So it's all in the right order then. Then you can just run through it and say, does this work? Like, as I'm going through, does this make sense at a kind of a minimal viable book kind of level, yeah, that makes sense. That all flows well. When you're happy with that, that forms a table of contents. And the agreement you've got to make yourself is I'm writing about that and no more. I'm not adding stuff. Make sure that plan's cast iron, not going to change before you start writing. Then you won't get what people think is writer's block, which is, oh, I didn't think I needed to cover that. And then they go off on a little kind of research mission. And the book ends up sort of 70,000 words when they meant it to be 40,000. And they can't remember why they started some of the things in the book. So you want that plan absolutely crystal clear before you write. And the other thing I'd say, because it really frustrates me, a mind map isn't a book plan. A lot of people do a mind map, and like they're one level away from the final structure, which a book is read sequentially. You've got to then put it into table of contents, hierarchical, structured table of contents. If you fail to do that before you start writing, mind maps are designed to make you keep thinking of new ideas. You haven't actually closed off that box and created the constraint.
So Joe, I'm interested to know. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here, but what are some of the misconceptions that you come across when people are looking to become a published author? Do people think it's going to happen overnight? Do people think they're going to have they're going to be a one-trick pony and this is their first book and they're going to be J.K. Rowling all of a sudden? I mean, how does
that's a great question. So yeah, the J.K. Rowling thing, like it looks exceptional. Everybody's like, I'm going to be a best-selling author and make £1 million, like just selling my book. And it'll be the word passive income always comes into it somewhere, or somebody's been told this is how you're going to be rich passively.
Write it and it sells, done, right?
You make hardly any. Like the misconception is that it's about selling books. It's absolutely not about selling books if you're a business writer. If you're writing a book for your business, so typically you make a couple of quid for every book sold.
Okay.
And I realized this when we sold all 12,000 of those books. We made about 30 grand. But the amount of effort we put into doing that, I could have made 30. And you know, the business we had at the time, we had clients paying us 250 grand. So for the amount of effort we put into that book, it was never worth the return in pure money. Like if you just look at the book sales. So thinking you're going to sell loads of books and become J.K. Rowling is the big misconception. And the misconception behind that misconception is thinking it's even about selling books. Yeah. And it's not people's fault for that, because, you know, we've got bestseller lists and we help authors get bestsellers, but it's so they can say they're a best-selling author. It's not because it's really about selling books. The whole industry, books, you know, as I alluded to my first business, the reason for a publisher to exist is to exploit that intellectual property by selling it. So publishers want authors to sell books. Everybody wants authors to sell books. Business owners who have written a book should be making their book sell their business. And so when you realize actually the book's job is a promotional tool, it's a tool to sell you, that's where all the money unlocks and you go, wow, now it makes sense. So when people come to us saying I'm going to sell thousands of copies, I'll check out their platform and then I'll spend a bit of time telling them it's probably not going to happen. Like the likelihood of you being J.K. Rowling, you might as well just take, you know, lottery tickets. You've probably got a higher chance of getting that. You know, the people that sell loads of books and make massive money from selling books are the exception. That's why they're exceptional. That's why they make the headlines. That's why we all remember their name. Yeah. They're not, you know, they're not the norm. The norm, and this stat changes. This is kind of plucked out the air as a kind of a general feel. Most traditional business book publishers will commit to an initial run of 3,000 copies. So they're doing it old style, 3,000 copies. They're expecting to make that return in 5 years. So if they've sold 3,000, they see the book as it didn't lose them money. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it made them money either. So that's what they're expecting, like 3,000 copies in 5 years. If you're aiming to sell that, and I said it's £2 a book the author may get, if they're lucky, depending on how they've published, you know, that's 6 grand for 60 hours work initially. The amount of work you see authors put into trying to sell the thing, because ego gets involved. It's like, I've got to sell the book. Like if I don't sell the book, it means my work of art was pointless.
You've got to pay for marketing there for a start, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, I'd whack that down. Like, don't wait for people to buy your book. Like that's the other misconception. People are going to find me on Amazon, and they will. You know, that does happen. They're going to find me on Amazon, then they're going to go out of their way to reach out to me because I'm now an author and I'm important, and then they're going to just give me their business. It's like, if you know the people that should be reading your book, give them the book. Don't wait for them to buy it. And what tends to happen, the more people you give the book to that you know are your right audience, they know other people that are your right audience. So then say, I'm reading this book, it's great. And then it spreads and you create this virus. And then actually you sell more books by giving it away. So trying to sell books when you should be giving the book away or finding any excuse to get it in the hands of your ideal customers is the big error. And the number of other publishers, and it makes me chuckle, like the paid for publishers that are in the same sector as us, they're talking about best selling this and best sell that. And like, they don't get it. They haven't come at this from a business first perspective. They are getting it. I think the whole industry is changing now. We all, there's a kind of collective consciousness that actually it's always been about the business and not the book. But not everybody's saying that yet.
So Joe, one of the things you touched on there was around the benefits of a book. And we have touched upon it, building authority. For the audience, what other benefits do you get from writing a book?
So clarity, when you express your ideas, your business content, like things that you just take for granted in the processes and the magic you work for your clients, when you actually sit down and say, right, I'm going to now lay this out in a proper order, I'm going to think about it, you get massive clarity about the value you provide to your audience. So you already get a sales uplift and ability to see genius in your existing business that you may not have, or you just take it for granted. So you get massive clarity on your own business value. Sometimes as a result of writing and planning books with us, people will change their business, or they'll see an opportunity that just wasn't there for them. Like, God, we're missing a massive potential to just fulfill a need that we've identified by writing the book that we just haven't got a product for yet. So like, there's a commercial value in writing the book. And what I said, we can write books with our authors. We've got a process for doing that. And it's an interview and outsourcing the writing, but not the authority process. If you can, as a business owner, doing the writing yourself will give you a massive personal development uplift and a business development uplift just in itself. So just writing, even if you never published, will give you some massive clarity and assets for your business. Like you might create a visual to explain something. Like now you've got something that could be a poster or a canvas, or it could be something you can train your team with.
Yeah, exactly right. That IP around an infographic or an acronym or something that allows you to tell your story much easier.
So there's that bit, but when you've connected it, like once it's published, this is the great, like everybody knows, like copyright is inherent. So as soon as you create something, it's your copyright. The problem comes when it comes to proving it, and publishing a book in the UK, and different worlds have their own libraries. A copy of that book goes to the Central Library in London. You've got a third party bona fide, trusted record that you came up with the idea first. So if you've got a brilliant piece, an idea, and you're like, I need to protect this, you can try and register it as a trademark, and you might want to do that as well. But having the thing published makes it, there's a public record that you were there first if people come along and try and copy your methods. So there's a protection element to that, just getting it published. There's the idea, like this is the big thing for me. Once you've got the book, you can create an army of salespeople. Like if you write the book in the right way and it's all about serving and providing huge value, they'll get your message pitch perfect every time. And they can, for example, like let's say you're talking to a potential new client and they're like, well, do you want to come and sit in the bath with me, Nathan? Like, do you fancy coming and sitting in the bath and telling me about your business? They wouldn't do that, but they'll take your book into the bath. They'll take your book onto the toilet with them. They'll take your book to intimate places.
Joe, but yeah, in theory.
Well, maybe you're the exception to the rule, but I don't get invited into my clients' bathrooms or on holiday with them, or into their private office, or so that's a really cool thing about a book, is that you can intimately get into your prospects, your audience's mind, intimately give them an opportunity to really engage with the value. And the great thing is when you start working with a client, they start telling you your process. They start telling you, like they're teaching you what they know about how you do what you do, and they're totally bought in by that point. So it's all about, you know this in the marketing sense. Like you want to spend as much time as you can. You've got like the drip effect. You probably want like 7 hours of interactions in different places. Well, like if they've taken their book to the toilet and they've been on the beach with your book and they were listening to your book, an audio version in the car to work. They're constantly thinking about you and your business through that time, and they start to become familiar, and it's like they've built a relationship with your concepts, your ideas. I'm
sure Daniel Priestley touches about that, and maybe it's oversubscribed about however many touch points in various locations.
Yeah, he does. He's great at that. So I think 4, 7, 11. It's
That's
four. I can't remember what one's which. I think it's 11 hours, 4 types of content and 7 locations.
Yeah.
Or 4 locations. I can never remember which one, but yeah, that's the kind of thing you want. You just want to be top of mind, but also you're not just top of mind. Like in our businesses, we all have to sell. Like founders and business owners and entrepreneurs, most of our work is encouraging and enthusing people about what we got. sometimes you have bad days, or you fluff what you meant to say. You're like, oh, I said that all wrong. Or like, that's not how I usually express that. Or I got so excited I forgot to like ask some serious questions. Your book gets it right every time. Like your book is going to be completely consistent. So to me, that's powerful. The other powerful benefit of having the book when you start to build team and scale is everybody in your organization can learn. They get a download of what you know about what you know. So it's a really useful tool for a business that's scaling. It's a really useful tool if you're the face of the business and you haven't got time. Like Daniel also says, he equates a book to a cup of coffee. He's like, if I'd have a coffee with that person and pick up the tab, I'd send them a book for free. And while I can't have, there are only so many hours in a day, I can only have so many coffees with people. I can do the book at scale, like 24/7, as many as I need to, as many people that want it can have it. So that's his analogy. Like 1,000 books for free a month is like him having 1,000 cups of coffee, high quality, value added cups of coffee with potential clients. So yeah.
Love that. Joe, I just want to finish with this because I'm conscious of time. For me, I mean, I listen to books. I don't know whether that's a generation thing or whatever. I find it so much easier to listen when I'm commuting or when I'm cycling. But there seems to be like television programs, like films, hugely saturated, and difficult to stand out no matter what industry you're in. Like for me, like I listen, and Nathan as well. We both read or listen to a lot of business books, right?
Yeah.
There seems to be a different, theory or around business or whatever. How do you stand out as an author? Is it by being super controversial, like the guy that the guy that wrote in the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck? Like I
Yeah.
thought that
Yeah.
was quite, that's quite controversial, right? How do you stand out nowadays? Because it is so saturated.
That's interesting. So my view on this. So we were always asked about Dan Meredith's book, How to Be Fucking Awesome,
Yeah,
and I remember being asked, somebody was saying like, is sweary titles a cool thing now? And I think like the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck came out actually after that book, but there was
right.
a kind of a general feel, and I think it was just picking up on a particular market. Or a segment of the market that's actually okay to say that you can be a bit irreverent and you can be a bit more edgy. The reason it happened, and I remember because I came up with the title of How to Be Fucking Awesome. I was working with Dan Meredith doing a book plan. And I said to him when I did it, and he's like, yeah, I love it. That's a title. I'm like, are you going to be bothered in 10 years or 20 years when you've got grandkids or kids? You've got a book with a sweary title. And he's like, fuck no, this is brilliant. And if you knew his audience, and this is the magic, he knew his audience so well. And I spent like a few days before we did the thing, cyber stalking him and his audience to see the language they used. The way to stand out is to actually stand out directly to the reader. So getting that person clearly in mind. If you know how you talk to them, you'll get their attention. Like if I say, hey, Stokely, I'm talking to you. And if I'm saying like, I've got something about video, Stokely, you'll be like, oh, my ears are picked up now. So talking to them in their language about things that matter to them is how you stand out. And we're not trying to compete for sales, remember. You just need to be able to talk intimately to the right people for your business. And you don't need millions of sales to do that for business. You probably need a few thousand at most for most kind of high value businesses over the life of a business. So you just need to be very, very conscious. This is the way we stand out, is like make that promise absolutely align with what's going on in the person's head. And it works with audiobooks. So I'm using that example, Dan Meredith again. His book sold phenomenally well in print and did okay in ebook. When we released the audiobook about a year later, absolutely smashed the sales of all of that because his audience are personal trainers, fitness pros, slightly younger than me. Like he's kind of sweet spot audience is probably like 30 to 40
Right.
now, but they were kind of like late 20s to kind of mid 30s when we did the book. They were already tuned, like they weren't consuming stuff in the same way. Like you can see I've got books everywhere. Like I love books. I'm a late comer to audiobooks. The only reason I now listen to audiobooks is because we publish them and because I can play them at double speed. And sometimes like I can listen to this faster than I can read it, or I'm doing something else like driving. And trying to read a book while driving is dangerous. Don't do that. I think talking, the cut through happens by being really crystal clear in what you got for them, making sure that promise resonates with them, that the keywords of the title talks to them, that it looks like the kind of thing they want. it sounds like this sounds like silly. Normal publishers are like, right, we've got to knock that one off the top spot. That's the book that's the one to beat, and they're all chasing the leader to try and like this top of the pops style kind of. I mean, that shows my age, doesn't it? I don't think that's been on telly for like 20 years. What's that? But they do this kind of like we're all competing to sell books, because that's what and I'm not knocking publishers. Publishers exist to sell books. That's a traditional model, so they're all about selling the book and trying to stand out. Books that are designed to build a business, the job is to just stand out to the people you want to talk to, just like niche marketing. So it's much more about aligning the message with your audience. And it's not really standing out, it's cutting through the noise. You just make a laser focused, kind of clear, like, you need to talk to me, you need to see this. Does that help? Is that
Joe, that's been unbelievable. Guys, thank you so much, Joe, for joining us today. It's always lovely to catch up, and it's really nice. I mean, I hope everyone listening, or I know everyone listening, would have got huge amounts of value. So thank you. To all those that are listening, if they would like to find out a bit more about you, Joe, or to connect, what's the best way to do that?
So rethinkpress.com is the easiest place to find us. I'll say to anybody listening to this at any point they do it, just to put my money where my mouth is, if you want a free copy of this book, and I don't know when this is going out, but by the time it comes out, there may be a new edition. Get in touch with us. Find me on social media, say, can I have a copy of your book? We'll post you one. So
and that book is, for the listeners, that's called How to Write Your Book Without the Fuss.
Yeah, How to Write Your Book Without the Fuss. It talks you through the author method, which we didn't cover. It talks you through the writer process, which we did. Right. It talks about title. It talks about getting your ideal reader, and positioning the book to make sure it promotes your business.
That's perfect. Thank you ever so much. Thank you all for listening. We look forward to seeing you on next show. Take care.